All right. Well, welcome to the InnoFrontier podcast. I am so excited to be here with Gwen. She is one of the leaders in the testing community here in Utah, has had a lot of responsibilities on boards and committees and talking about the future of testing. Been doing a lot of the grunt work herself and leading teams. A few of the things that I think is very interesting is all the time you've spent in education. And then currently you're the founder of AthenaIQ, right?
Yep.
And that is, and I'm really excited to dive a little bit more into that. So, Gwen, wanted to kind of hear, first, what got you interested in technology, and what kind of led you to getting your first tech job?
Wow, going way back. The first interaction with technology was actually really young age. My first programming language was Logo. I don't know if you remember that. It was a little turtle that you would program to make shapes.
Amazing.
I think I was in third grade. So that was my introduction to it, and I had the opportunity to do small things here and there growing up, and didn't really think about it as a career until I moved to Utah, and I had the opportunity to join Prodigy online service before the broad internet. It was online services, and so I got to join them in a support role, and that kind of stemmed everything else. I got really interested in development, got really interested in kind of learning just the general IT, building your own network, understanding how to support hardware, understanding how to support software, building all of that. And then ended up, finishing college, went through a tech program, and didn't actually go to a university and get my bachelor's until way later, until actually working for Western Governors. So I did tech school early on because back then they just needed people to do whatever. The need was so high that they were just trying to get people in as quickly as possible and train them on the job. And you see some of that today, but at that time it was very, very much the case. And so, I got in, got some experience. I actually interviewed for my very first non kind of support role, where I was actually part of the creative process. I applied for a development role with a company called Tomax. I think it was late 90s. And applied for the developer role, and the individual who was interviewing me said, you have a personality where you can communicate as well as understand technology. And he's like, have you ever considered software testing? And I had never heard of software testing before then. And so I was like, well, let me think about it. And so I went back and kind of researched it a little bit, kind of thought about it. It's like, do I really want to do this? And realized it was actually a better fit for my skill set. And so ended up becoming a software tester, and then have just continued in different roles. I mean, I've done everything from software testing to leading entire technology teams. So it's been quite the adventure.
That's so exciting. So you joined Western Governors when it, pretty early on. I'm not sure exactly when Western Governors was established, but I certainly hadn't heard of it before 2008. So talk to me about how you got introduced to them, and, maybe even a little bit about Western Governors itself and kind of the changes it's made over the past 10 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So when I joined, I ended up being introduced to them through a recruiting friend of mine. And they were just really starting to get some formality around their IT structure. They had some applications in place that they had built. They were very much a build versus buy when I joined. And so there was a lot of homegrown stuff, a lot of custom projects, a lot of legacy stuff interacting with Oracle and with Banner, and kind of keeping the school systems together. So it was a lot of learning really quickly, but I was the very first tester that they brought on there. And so I actually built their application testing team from the ground up.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So it was really kind of exciting. And then by the end of it, I actually ended up having the opportunity to help be a project manager for one of their entire redesigns of the student experience. So I was the kind of served as a dual role, both in quality and technical project management. Um, and so I got to be both, both on the quality side as well as kind of the product side of things, and kind of getting people kind of focused on what the end solution is going to be, and what problems we were going to fix first, and what that looked like from a technology standpoint. So that really pushed me from a management and a leadership standpoint.
And so you're at Western Governors, you're building out their whole quality team. How did you, start to go from there? I know you'd had a lot of experience before, but what were some of the principles you implemented to like build your team? Like, who did you want? What type of people were you looking for? Like, how did you go about building that team?
Yeah, so I mean, because we were such a lean team there, getting headcount was really, really hard. So the headcount that we got had to be very dynamic. Um, so I actually recruited from within pretty heavily, um, individuals who really understand the systems, understood kind of, you know, the internal operations of Western Governors. And that actually really helped, because the subject matter expertise for just understanding how each of the colleges worked together, and the systems that kind of integrated, between students and programs and competencies, and getting everything ready for accreditation, and all of that. I mean, there's a lot of complexity that goes into that, and so getting people who really understood that was of key importance at that time. And then later on, once we had some established process in place and really kind of understood what the quality context looked like for the organization, then I was able to bring more of the automation side of it in. And I
Hmm.
had just started building that out when I ended up leaving.
And then tell us little bit about that leave, and kind of the what pulled you to your next company, and then eventually how that led you to Pearson's.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to go back to a fintech role. It was a pretty dramatic jump from a management standpoint. I was leading global teams at that point. Um, so it gave me, a little bit different kind of experience. I got into, I had, I was managing quality for several different applications internally, all different functions within the banking world, different electronic type transactions, different payment type systems. This was pretty early on in the payment, before PayPal and before those became really mainstream, Venmo and all those that they use today. There were a lot. It was a little bit more fundamental, and just kind of foundational stuff. Things like processing checks, taking digital check or taking physical checks and transitioning those to digital, that kind of stuff. So I was working in that for a little while. Had the opportunity to work with teams out of China, out of India,
Hmm.
and so the strategy there was really kind of utilizing the offshore, because offshore was really, really big during that time. Um, so that kind of helped build kind of the global perspective, um, and kind of bring some of that strategy into my experience. So I really enjoyed that. And then I ended up having the opportunity to get back into EdTech, which I really truly love. EdTech is kind of my passion space. And you've kind of seen that through my career. I keep ending up back there. Um, but I had the opportunity to come back through Pearson, and kind of continued the global team there. We did a lot of work. I was working on a lot of their learning platforms slash information systems that at that time they had acquired a number of different systems, and so there was a lot of integration testing, a lot of strategy around how you automated that, what the right amount of automation was. Right, we had teams that were doing all automation, we had teams that were not doing any, so finding the right balance on where we were going to find the highest value. So that kind of brought entirely new challenges. But again, it was back in the ed tech space, and I really enjoyed that. So yeah, and then Waterford, I had the opportunity to join them, and that took me from higher ed into the early ed kind of world. Completely different problem set and completely different arena, and so that was really that pushed me in different ways. It was also a global team. I had teams out of Romania,
Hmm.
um, as well as the US. And then that particular role actually had the opportunity to take on the entire IT operational team. So I went from just managing quality to taking over their entire IT department. And it was everything from Salesforce development and administration to, the networking, all of the systems, all of the support, all of the application, the vendor orchestration, vendor management. So it was a lot. um, and yeah,
That is
loved
a
that.
lot.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a lot.
so I'm just kind of curious how you managed, well, maybe I'll break it up into two questions. So first of
Yeah.
all, when you're managing global teams, some of these outsourced teams, and um, what were some of the things that you did to help maintain the balance of, your own personal life with working with some of those countries? I mean, I've spent a lot of time, working with them too, and it can be
Yeah.
it can be quite a tension for people. Any suggestions?
Yeah. In all honesty, it took me a really long time to figure that out. Because I tend to be one of those people that I err toward more the workaholic side of things, and so I don't set very good boundaries. So I'm working on that. I'm a work in progress on that side of things. But I think some of the things that I try to do is if I know I'm going to be working with offshore, I try to schedule my time appropriately. So I try, to adjust my schedule if needed. Try to take my breaks during the day. You know, there are certain times and certain things that I want to accomplish that are for me during the day. So whether that's, meditating or taking a walk and getting out and getting some fresh air or giving my self the opportunity to have a really nice workout or, take a lunch here and there. Um, I try to kind of balance it and instead of kind of creating the strict boundaries of, oh, I'm only going to work this time to this time, I try to kind of fit my life into my work schedule as opposed to trying to like separate them both. So
Wow, I
that's
mean,
worked for me.
if I you say almost word for word, I think what I've eventually come to understand is, for me, it's not so much about having a work-life balance, it's about having your life balance. Work is a part of my life.
Yeah.
All the other
Yeah,
things are a part of my
exactly.
life. So how do I find it to be cohesive? And for some people, they just really need to segment. For me, it's just easier to wrap it all in one thing and then just really
Yeah.
look at how I'm spending my time. I actually love that. It works for me as well. I'm sure it doesn't work for
Yeah.
others, but
Yeah.
especially when you're working with offshore teams.
It does. Yeah. Because I mean, a lot of times you don't know what's going to come up. You don't know, you know, best case scenario, you have it scheduled, right? But things come up and, you end up on calls until 3 in the morning, right? So giving yourself kind of a little bit of flexibility to say, maybe I'm going to sleep in a little bit today. I'm
Yeah.
not, maybe I move some of these morning things to the afternoon so I can give myself just that little break to refresh.
No, that's powerful. That's really
Yeah.
powerful. So this for a lot of people listening, I'm sure that eventually transitioning to management is something that they're interested in. It sounds like, I
Yeah.
mean, you'd worked in management, obviously, but like that's a pretty drastic shift to be owning all things quality, then owning all things IT. Having
Yeah.
worked with both Salesforce and QA, very different. Very, each
Yeah.
individual piece of those would have their own person. Like, how? What did you do? How did you do that?
Um, I relied on a lot of my people in terms of I let the experts do their thing, right? So the thing that you learn as you become a leader and as you become especially the higher you get, as when you start looking at more strategic leadership, you have to be more hands off. And you're not going to ever know it all, right? You can't be the expert in all things. That's just the reality of it. So I mean, I knew enough to know what I needed to learn more and who to rely on to get the stuff done that needed to be done. And then, we worked together to kind of build out a strategy that would best benefit the organization moving forward because it was in a bit of disarray when I took it on. I mean, from a hardware, from an inventory perspective, there wasn't much process around it. And so I think the major thing that needed to be done wasn't necessarily around technology. It was around bringing method to the madness, right? And getting just enough process in place that we could handle support. We could handle the requests coming in from the Salesforce development side. We knew what we needed to do from an administrative side. And, all of these other pieces could be handled. And I had the people to do it. They just needed kind of the guidance and the structure in place to actually execute. So relying on a lot of my top talent, knowing who the experts were and allowing them to be experts was a big piece of me being able to be successful in that role.
Fantastic, fantastic advice. And definitely things I need to be heeding. I really like
Yeah.
that. So it just seems like there's always this tension, in your career to be in education and then kind of always coming back to fintech and then going to education. So, you know, the next step of your career is if I remember, is heading over to Zions, which is a large regional bank in the U.S.
Yeah.
What was it about that particular opportunity that was so appealing?
Well, so at the time, Zions was doing a lot of work around their digital transformation and actually taking a lot of their legacy stuff and modernizing it onto a single platform that could handle all of it. That was a massive multi-billion-dollar investment from the organization. And so I came in right at the right time to kind of be a part of that. Um, Unfortunately, my venture there, it was weird. I had a short stint there. Um, and it was, HR hiccups like around benefits and being able to get those and have those continue. It made for it to be a kind of a short stint. But in all reality, the problems that we were dealing with there, I mean, my team was really focused on automation and giving them automation
Hmm.
strategies for I mean everything from mainframe all the way up to cloud, these massive next generation cloud tools. And so it was a pretty wide span and pretty broad in terms of technology responsibilities as well. So it was, and all of those little pieces had to work together, right? In some way or another. And so um it was really fun. I think there was still, it came up. So I was actually laid off due to, ed tech tends to be very cyclical. So I was dealing with a layoff situation and found that role. And it worked really well for the time being. But I found that I needed a little bit more than baking. I love fintech. I enjoy the complexity of it, but I think long term I knew that I needed something a little bit more than that. So that's why I eventually decided to move on.
No, that's great. What's kind of your philosophy about building these automation teams specifically? It's amazing to me to hear that there's some teams that aren't still implementing automation. At what point in an organization do you think that they're ready for something like that?
It used to be that I believed that the team really needed to be really well functioning before automation made sense. Um, and anymore, the tools have gotten so great that I don't necessarily think that's a prerequisite. And I think that the lift is way less today than it used to be. Um, you know, late early 2000s when automation was just kind of beginning and people had to know how to code. Um, that was a much different story than it is today. The tools that you have today are way more intuitive, way easier to work with, a way less of a lift than having to go out and learn, Python or learn, Java to be able to automate anything. Um, Now, at the end of the day, I mean, if you're going to be building these really complex frameworks, you're going to need someone who understands that stuff. And so that's where some of these more senior roles kind of come in. But, um, you know, I think the major shift for me has been around implementing the right automation in the right places that are going to give you the highest value and not just looking at it as a blanket solution. And I think that's where teams kind of fall because they'll go in, they'll be like, okay, automation is the magic. It's the thing that's going to get us to where we want to be. And in a lot of ways, they don't even know where they are, let alone where they want to be. Right. And so teams that aren't clear on that, I think are going to struggle with automation. Where automation really helps is when teams kind of recognize, here are the areas that we're really good at. here are our biggest areas of risk. Here are our biggest areas where we have gaps in competency, we have gaps in skills. Those are the areas where automation can actually kind of bring additional value. And so looking at it from a more strategic standpoint, and instead of going in and automating everything, going in and automating the thing that's the time killer, automating the thing that's the highest risk, right? Getting those little wins along the way can be such a huge difference in terms of getting success in your automation strategy. And that's probably the biggest thing I've learned over the course of the last 5 years, is that you've got to be value driven.
Totally agree. As in your roles since, you've had a couple roles, and then I really want to get to what you're doing with AthenaIQ. Um, but in the past couple roles you've had, talk to us a little bit about those, and about some of the, interesting companies and the challenges there, and then would love to hop into, the consulting that you're doing and the company
Yeah.
that you're starting and everything.
Yeah, I mean, so the most recent company that I worked with full time was UST Expansion. They were a subsidiary of a much larger consulting firm, but I joined them primarily because of a program that they had that really struck me. And it was their Step It Up America program, where they really work with veteran programs, the SkillBridge program that the Armed Forces puts on for veterans coming out of active military into civilian roles. Um, they have a training and a an apprenticeship program where they will take these individuals coming out of active duty and give them 4 months, 4 to 6 months of like very intensive 8 to 10 hours a day training to teach them a skill, whether it be programming or becoming an estet, or we had mainframe operators as one of them. So different types of skill sets, but we partner with companies that are willing to sponsor them for a certain period of time. And so they bring them on, and then they kind of can take everything that we've taught them and immediately put it to work and kind of immerse themselves in a real environment working on real problems, and it kind of gives them that leg up on uh on a career that will help support them as a civilian. So it's such a beautiful program. I had the opportunity to teach the program twice in my tenure there, and it was some of the hardest work I've ever done. I had to build out the curriculum as I was training it, so that introduced a whole lot of complexity. But it was some of the most rewarding work I've ever done in my entire career. It was beautiful to see these individuals who were so committed um, to this new part of their lives. And so I loved that. I really, really enjoy teaching. I really, really enjoy programs that are kind of looking for other ways to bring people into technology, especially the underserved populations. And so that one was a big one. Um,
Well, and it's a mission that's really close to my heart. I'm in the National Guard, and and I see military members transition out, and I see very few going into technology. Um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and I don't always know the reason why, but the only thing that really it's just kind of a culture thing, and a lot of them don't think to, and it's kind of this
right.
opportunity. That's why I really love this type of program, is it does give them that opportunity, because you have some of the hardest working people in the world with great
Yeah,
discipline, people that would be incredible in programming roles. They're used to ambiguous situations with which technology always is. Um, and it just seems to me to be a no-brainer, yet you just don't see that many going into it. I don't know if you have any thoughts
yeah.
around why people don't, but
I think one of the observations that I had going through the program and kind of working with these individuals day to day is it's a pretty, I think the biggest jump for them is coming from an environment where they are told what to do every moment of the day, right? And you follow orders, you follow orders, you follow. It's very structured. It's very militant, you know. And then all of a sudden, you're put into this environment where you're told to think and to use critical thought and to problem solve, and to the skills that you have to learn to interact with an agile team, do testing, understand this, learn the systems that you're trying to learn, and you know build those kind of skills together, they're a lot different. Those are very, very different than just taking orders. And so I think that's a very, very different world. And so, that was an area that a lot of people struggled in. I was by the end of it, because of the program being, really powerful and having the opportunity to kind of have mentoring be a part of it and coaching be a part of it. We actually had someone who did nothing but do kind of transition coaching and life coaching for these individuals coming. So it wasn't just from a technical perspective that they were getting help, but they were actually getting help from someone who had a military background, who
Hmm.
was working with them on some of the softer skills and kind of understanding, no, this is a different world. You get to use your brain now. You get to bring, you get to bring your mind to work. You have to bring your problem solving skills. Don't be looking for someone to tell you what to do every 5 seconds. You know, you get to kind of drive yourself here. And I think that was probably one of the largest learning curves. But but in all honesty, I mean, I think it's I think it's really hard for people to kind of figure out that there's opportunity there, especially at these lower levels. They're just not quite sure how to get in, how to get in the door. So this program provides a lot of opportunity, and I've had the opportunity to meet several others who are involved in similar spaces where they're kind of looking at trying to get open doors as well, whether it be for women coming out of, coming out from raising their kids to a certain point and they're just looking
Hmm.
to get back in the workforce, military, you name it, kind of opening some different avenues to get back into the technical field because we need it. I mean, the shortage continues. Whether I see people being laid off, but there are more positions than ever out there. So it's a weird dynamic right now that's I haven't quite figured out all the answers to, but
Well, I appreciate that perspective. I see it too. There's so much talent out there and so many people that would be interested in technology, but for whatever reason, maybe they just don't hear about it. They just don't think about it. You made the
yeah.
example of the working mom or, or the stay-at-home mom that now is looking to get back in the workforce, totally capable, would be incredible asset for an organization, yet maybe just doesn't know about the opportunity. I love the mission of that. So you've spent time in consulting and have probably done a lot of consulting outside. You've served on committees and boards. What
Yeah.
led you to kind of now take on the full-time, Athena IQ? Like, how did that start to come up in your mind at like, hey, I'm gonna all in on consulting?
Yeah, I mean, so wow, I think it was a matter of I needed to stay sharp, and I needed to do something that was a little bit more entrepreneurship and that had a little bit more freedom and flexibility than, jumping back into a role. Being completely transparent, I am still looking for a new opportunity. Athena IQ is definitely, I'm building it from the ground up. So, one of the biggest draws was working with teams to really focus in on the real problems that were causing these inefficiencies. Working with teams who just were struggling to kind of um, find a path forward. They were so stuck in the everyday work and the nitty gritty, they weren't really taking the opportunity to look at, okay, what is it that, what are the things that we're doing that are preventing us from getting the outcomes that we want. And so, I had the opportunity to work with a local client here, and I worked with them for about 8 weeks. Did a deep dive, both in leadership team as well as in the individual functions of the team, and worked with them to kind of drive out, okay, what's going on, where are the communication patterns breaking down, where is it that process isn't supporting. And and a lot of times you find out that in these small to kind of mid-sized companies, um, you've got people kind of relying on their brains to kind of get stuff done because they're all in that kind of get stuff done, startup mentality. And instead of working smarter, they tend to find kind of work harder, right? And so there becomes a point, I think, in a growth of an organization where uh, that becomes, you've maxed out your your productivity, and you're getting no more return on that, right? In fact, it's probably reducing your return at that point, and it just doesn't scale to the needs of the organization. And so um having the opportunity to work with organizations in a way where I can come in, be that third party expert, look at what's going on, get to the root of the problems, and give them a path forward. Um, that I love that idea. I mean, that's probably my biggest strength, is being able to look at the systems at play and pick out, okay, here's what's not working. Here are some suggestions for moving forward that will help. Um, Being able to do that full time would be a dream. So that's kind of where AthenaIQ comes into play. I've had the opportunity to do that on a part-time basis. We'll see where it goes.
Well, we're certainly cheering for you. I think it's great, and you certainly have the skill set to bring that to an organization. One of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about, and obviously want to be sensitive of the time, but the future of testing. I think that everybody wants to know what the future of testing is going to be, with, having AI, and machine learning and so many tools coming out. When you kind of look ahead,
Yeah.
seeing all, everything that's been behind you, what do you see over the next, few years? Nobody can predict perfectly, but what are some of the things you're looking at over the next few years as far as the future in testing?
Oh gosh. Well, so the future of testing in my eyes is just going to broaden. We're looking at a lot of the Web3 technologies kind of coming into play. We're looking at, a lot more AR, VR coming into play. AI is obviously just, I mean, now that it's out, like this was the first year, I think that, you know, they released Chat GPT, and suddenly AI became a real thing instead of a marketing ploy, right? And
Yes.
I think that's scared a lot of people. Um, to me, it just means our world just gets way more interesting. We have so many opportunities out there, whether it's, looking at VR experiences, whether it's looking at blockchain and looking at, how that's going to be incorporated into our everyday lives. I mean, the the ability to kind of just imagine what our world's going to be like over the next few years as we start implementing some of this stuff. Um, all of that needs to be tested. And anybody who's used ChatGPT or any of these AI tools knows that they're not perfect. And they're deeply flawed because they're trained on deeply flawed information. And so, there's going to be some work to kind of tune those and get them working in a way that's safe, a little bit safer, that we can rely on a little bit more, just improve those models over time. Um, and I think, the same is going to be true for testing. So, um, I guess my outlook on it is to really try to encourage people, whether you're a tester, developer, product owner, you name it, anybody in the creative delivery space, to really just embrace it and get used to it and start playing with it and start, you know, kind of stretching the limits on what you think it can do to help you, so that you're getting your hands on it, because it's the individuals who are actually getting familiar with it who are going to be the most marketable moving forward. Um, and so, don't be afraid of it, because it is the future and it's not going away. So if we can embrace it and start integrating it with our process today, I think that's where we're going to get that's where we're going to see magic happen.
Such great advice. The thing that I really latched onto was the fact, with all of these new technologies, AI can't, test everything. AI can't
No.
do, and especially as new technologies come out. You mentioned Web3. It has its own specific type of testing. You mentioned like
Yeah.
LLM testing. Like,
Yep.
there's going to be endless opportunities for testing, and at quality, what we're trying to do is just to eliminate all of those things that no tester actually wants to do, so they can do all of the things that are interesting.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I just really like that. And for all the things that are out today, imagine what is coming tomorrow. We don't even
Right.
know.
Right.
There's going to be robotics testing. There's going to be, just some really cool stuff. And you're right. If you can get ahead on this stage, imagine where you're going to be at in the next stage. The thing I
Right.
do worry about the most is that for people, as they progress in their careers, if they're not paying attention, I think the gap will get wider in terms of skill set, not smaller. Um,
Yeah.
Even though that AI disseminates a lot of, it does empower you so much more, but the rate at which you can learn will only be increasing, and it's going to be just hard to catch up. Certainly not impossible, but I think
Yeah.
that those points are really really valuable to kind of maybe put a bow on all of it as you're talking with other people in test and development, what other parts of advice from, all the experience that you have that you would say, hey, if you could just do these next few things in your career to really set yourself up for success, what would some of those key things be?
Oh, the things that have been interesting to me the most, one of the biggest problems I've seen recently in the quality space is that there are lots of testers out there, but there are very few really good testers. I think we've kind of lowered the bar for what we think testing should be. And organizations have kind of made it like they've been okay with having individuals who are completely non-technical going in and providing this gut check on stuff. And that's not quality to me, right? That's not
Mm.
real testing to me. And I think the industry as a whole, I think from a reputation standpoint and just from driving us forward and staying relevant, I think, one of the things that testers really need to consider is that they need to be technical. If you don't understand the systems that you're testing, then you cannot be an effective tester, period. And I think we kind of got away from, like, I don't know where it happened. I think, as agile kind of took over, we kind of figured out like we have to be faster and we just have to rely on our experience. And that was fine. But then nobody kind of caught up with the fact that no, if you're going to do that, you have to be a system expert. Like you have to have the knowledge of how these systems interact underneath the covers, or really you're just flipping switches. So you're not really adding that kind of value when you're looking at larger quality initiatives and you're looking at, preventing the biggest issues that are going to happen when it gets into production. So I think, really kind of pushing ourselves as individuals and as test practitioners to make it our business to be experts. And what I mean by expert is we know the systems we're testing. We understand how they work. And if we don't understand, we find out, right? We ask those questions, we dig in, we take the time to get to know them. We take the time to dig in and look at the database layer. We look at the different services and the architecture underlying that really supports the system as a whole and supports the data flow through it, because that's going to allow us to be way more valuable to the organization as a whole moving forward, because we're going to have better perspectives, right? We're going to have a better understanding of what's going on when that screen, looks different than we think it should look. We can actually go in and say, oh, it's because of this and this and this particular flag underneath isn't getting triggered. We understand cause and effect, where I think we've kind of missed that along the way. So when I coach testers, I coach them in getting technical, really understanding those systems. And if they don't figure it out, like really dig in, almost reverse engineer them if they need to. Another thing that I really encourage people to do is study critical thinking, study systems thinking. Um, get in there and understand human psychology a little bit, because at the root of all user interactions is psychology and human bias. And boy, that affects so much of what we do. Um, so between the technical part and the human psychology part and understanding bias and understanding critical thinking and systems thinking, I think if we got a little bit more buffering there, we could take our industry to the next level.
Gwen, that is a perfect place to end. I can't thank you enough for coming on. We really wish you the best, and thank you so much
You
for
know,
spending this time with us. It means a lot.
it was my pleasure.